And we're back with another episode of Dojo Live. This is Tulio Sergusa. Today is Thursday, March 3rd, 2022. Today we have our guest, who is Aroon Tungare, the CEO of NODABL Networks, who's broadcasting from the Chicago area. Good to have you with us, Aroon, on the show. And also joining me is Kim Lantis in Hermosillo, Mexico,
That's
who's
right.
running a bit of a kennel today.
Yeah, you'll probably be hearing my 4-year-old daughter's daycare and kennel, my 4-year-old daughter Zoe, as well as our foster dog Sansa, who seems to be quite barky today. So my
Well,
apologies.
we like to keep it real here on Dojo
Yeah.
Live. So it's good to have you both with us. We're talking about the wireless industry today, and specifically new innovation and private wireless, how 5G and LTE are reshaping that place, that industry. But before we go and dive into the topic, introduce the topic, and see everything we can learn, let's get to know our guest a little bit better. Aroon, if you could kindly introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dig into NODABL Networks. Again, thanks for being with us today.
Sure. Thanks, Tulio and Kim, for inviting me. I'm Aroon Tungare. I'm actually a chemical engineer by training. I have a bachelor's in chemical engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay, India. And then I came here for grad school and went to Syracuse University, where I actually got a PhD in chemical engineering. So you'll wonder, what is a chemical engineer doing in the telecom industry? So what happened is through somewhat of a fortuitous, turn of events, I've ended up spending most of my professional career in telecom and in wireless. I joined Motorola about 20 years ago, and I was with Motorola for 20 years. And there I was involved with mostly in the R&D part of the company, in the corporate labs. I led research teams involved in miniaturization technologies. So as you know, when this mobile phone first started, it was the size of a brick. And now it is something you can so easily slip into your shirt or pant pocket. And, a lot of that was due to some of the pioneering work in miniaturization, which we did in Motorola and Motorola Labs. I led that activity within the company. And also, the cell phone has transitioned from being just a phone to what is now called a smartphone. So, my teams are also responsible for incorporating some of the smarts that you see, in the cell phones today. Other than that, I was involved in the labs organization for the longest time in Motorola. I ended up securing 19 patents for myself and the company along the way. So that was kind of nice. I learned quite a few things, being in part of the research organization, and that is, you not only have to anticipate change, but you have to create change. And creating change is one of the elements I learned over my professional career there, which I'm kind of now implementing, at NODABL. And also, when you're doing research, you start with something which is a figment of someone's imagination. It starts in the lab as a figment of someone's imagination, and then you put it in hundreds of millions of product. And to do that, take something from the lab and incorporate it in a product in a very high volume manufacturing environment, requires a lot of partnerships. So you understand the importance of partnerships both within the company and partnerships in your supply chain. And that's something which I learned along the way, because we had several new technologies which we developed, which we incorporate into the product. And that, again, is one of the elements I'm kind of bringing into focus at NODABL.
All right, that's great. Sounds like we're talking to an expert in wireless. You've been around long enough to know where all the bodies are buried and what the opportunities are.
Absolutely.
How does that all come together with Notable? What can you tell us a little bit about the company, Notable Networks?
Yeah, so we formed my co-founder Steve Wilson and I founded Nodable about 3 years ago, and we are headquartered out of Waxahachie, Texas, which is about 30 miles south of Dallas. And the reason we founded Notable is we came across an aha kind of a moment where we saw certain industry trends. My co-founder had been in the fiber optic business, for a very long time. Here I was coming from the wireless side, and we realized that there was a perfect storm of events happening. One was that the technology, as you know, in telecommunications is transitioning from 4G to 5G. So, you're going from 4G networks to 5G networks, very advanced networks, high speeds, low latency, etc. Whenever there's a transition in technology, it creates opportunities for new players. So we realized that. The second is the regulatory environment. The spectrum environment in wireless was changing. FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, was making significant changes in how it allocated spectrum. And spectrum is very a key ingredient in anything wireless. If you don't have spectrum, you can't do anything. So that was another change, which was in the right direction as far as we are concerned. The third was cloud hosting. Everything is going to the cloud. And it was inevitable that telecom hosting would also move to the cloud. So a lot of the core telecom functions started moving into the cloud, which meant that telecom networks now were suddenly very cost effective and affordable for not just large enterprises, but also for small enterprises. So that was the third factor. And the fourth factor was what you hear about every day. All enterprises, large and small, are talking of digital transformation, not just commercial enterprises, but also cities and counties are talking of smart cities. Manufacturing is talking about Industry 4.0, artificial intelligence, data analytics. All that really requires robust and secure networks. So, we actually provide that core infrastructure for all this talk about digital transformation. And so we realized that this was just an opportune time to address this, and Notable was born.
Love it. Yeah. Let's see what we can learn today. I mean, obviously, even in big data, right? You can have all the wonderful bells and whistles of the technology that can collect all the various contextual data, but to analyze it, all that has to go somewhere. And networking becomes the critical factor to make all that happen. And we know how packets get lost sometimes if you don't have the right infrastructure. So it's very, very timely thing you're doing. Let's dig in and see what we can learn. Kim, if you could please kick off the conversation with the topic. Let's go right into it.
I'm going to try. So thank you, Aroon, for being here. Thank
Zoe,
you.
take it away, Zoe.
Yeah, exactly. I did something that I never thought I would do, and that's turn pants right side out while I'm on a Dojo Live show.
Mommy, I want to do the announcement.
You want yo? Okay, here we go. So thank you, everyone. This is Zoe.
Hello, Zoe.
So today's topic, as chosen by you, Aroon, is private cellular networks, the new wild, wild west in wireless. Specifically, how private LTE and 5G networks are disrupting the wireless industry, status quo, of course, and enabling the digital transformation of private enterprises and local governments. So my question for you is, let's dig into this wild, wild west analogy, metaphor. What is happening?
Yeah, so I was a little facetious. Hello there. I was being a little facetious in calling this the wild, wild west in wireless, but it is in many ways true. At one time, cellular networks was the exclusive domain of nationwide wireless carriers, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. And there was a reason for that, and that was because spectrum used to be auctioned on a nationwide basis. you needed deep pockets, billions of dollars to get spectrum licenses. They had the monopoly for a long time. As I mentioned earlier, now FCC has changed the requirements of how they regulate spectrum and how they license spectrum. More recently, FCC started licensing spectrum on a county by county basis. So there are 32,000 counties around the US, and you can get 10 megahertz spectrum licenses on a county by county basis. So instead of shelling out billions of dollars for licenses, if you're only interested in working in a particular county or a particular state, you need not spend large amounts of money to get licenses. Just to give you an example, there was a recent auction for the CBRS spectrum, which is a very nice spectrum band for doing 5G, cellular services, 3.5 gigahertz. In Dallas County, which is a neighboring county to where we are located, this 10 megahertz of spectrum went for $9 million, for a 10-year license. But in
Did
Ellis
you say
County,
9 million or 9 billion?
No, 9 million. 9 million
okay.
for a 10 megahertz slice for 10 years. But just in neighboring Ellis County, where we are located, and we are just 30 miles from Dallas, that same 10 megahertz of spectrum went for only $30,000. So you can see, the big players were playing in the tier 1, tier 2 markets, but the tier 3, tier 4 markets, which are not financially that attractive to them, became open game for a large number of vendors. Then also, as I mentioned earlier, the networks have become very affordable for large and small businesses alike. And that is because of the cloud hosting of the network. So in cloud hosting, what happens is the core network actually resides in the cloud and is shared among multiple users. So, for a small enterprise, it doesn't have to have all the heavy lifting which happens in a cellular network to be on their premises, but they just, they in a sense subscribe to it in the cloud, makes it very affordable. Then also there's been a large number of OEMs who are now providing the technology for cloud-hosted networks. The usual players are already there, the Ericssons, the Nokias of the world. There's Motorola, but there are at least 10 or 15 OEMs which provide these kinds of cloud-hosted network services, both for LTE technology and for 5G technology. So all this is kind of disrupting really the status quo, which was the monopoly, of the nationwide carriers.
It's all much more accessible. If you don't mind my own personal ignorance, what is an OEM?
Oh, OEM is original equipment manufacturer. So these are companies like Apple, like Samsung, like Motorola, Ericsson, Nokia, etc., who actually manufacture, equipment for the industry.
Got it. Thank you very much.
So this is very interesting. I started my career 33 years ago in telecom, and it was with MCI who broke up the big monopoly system.
Sure.
They had a history of doing that, and so the local carriers were also the long distance carriers, so that got broken up, and the rest is history, right? That opened up everything for us. What I'm hearing though now, it's the same as sort of happening in wireless, because even though it's in essence anyone can compete, you really couldn't unless you can afford to spend billions of dollars on a spectrum nationwide.
Correct.
So what I'm hearing is that now has been decentralized, where you can buy spectrums regionally, locally. So in essence, you could have local wireless carriers, right? Is that or the possibility for smart cities, for example, who have connected devices, whether it's cameras for traffic control or sensors or things of that sort for security purposes. They now can leverage these localized spectrums in a way that's affordable without having to rely on the big players. That where it's going, and how's that sort of taken flight? Is that
so
traction?
That's kind of where it's going. So FCC realized there was a lot of federal spectrum which was not being very optimally used. Just to give you one example, There is the CBRS band, Citizens Broadband Radio Service Band spectrum. This was 150 megahertz of spectrum, which is a large chunk of spectrum as spectrum goes, in the 3.5 gigahertz range. This was actually being used by federal users. There were two classes of federal users. One is satellite downlink, systems, and the other one was warships. The naval warships, when they came into port, they used this spectrum for communication, on land. Now, as you can see, there was a large part of the country where the spectrum was really not being used at all. And FCC and the federal government is trying to provide 5G and broadband throughout the country, and for that they had to make spectrum available. So they took this 150 megahertz of spectrum and said, this spectrum is going to be a shared spectrum between the federal and government, federal and private users. And they came up with this new regulatory scheme for this spectrum. It was very successful. And they're doing it again now for the other spectrum auctions which are coming up. So as you mentioned, Tulio, the spectrum spigot is kind of being released, and I think that benefits all of us.
Great. So how does your company come into play with this? How does NODABL Networks leverage this new movement, this change? What's the use cases that you guys are pursuing?
Yeah, so what we have done at NODABL is we have established strategic partnerships with three key industry players, and we might add a few more partners. We are a channel partner for Nokia. We are a channel partner for Motorola. These are obviously, well-known names in telecom. Motorola invented cellular telephony. My parent, the company I worked with for 20 years. Nokia obviously is, well-known worldwide as a telecom equipment provider. And then there is a third company called Cellular, which is a Silicon Valley startup, but they're up-and-coming company in this area. So we have partnered with these companies. So we can go to a customer and actually deploy either a Nokia system, a Motorola system, or a Cellular system. They're in many ways similar, but there are also unique differences, which makes it suitable for a particular customer to have a Nokia system versus a Motorola versus a Cellular system. So what we do as NODABL is we are a system integrator and a private network operator. So we'll go to a customer, understand the customer's needs, design a network for them, do all the RF modeling, etc., to customize the network for their needs. We'll install the network, we will launch the network, and then we will monitor the network. So the customer gets the benefit of full control over their private network without the hassle of having to manage a complex cellular network. So that's essentially what we do as NODABL. In terms of the markets we address, we are addressing several verticals. We are going after the manufacturing vertical because they are interested in Industry 4.0. And as I mentioned earlier, they require these very secure private networks. They require the mobility which comes with cellular, etc. We are going after smart cities. So we are talking to a lot of cities and counties where they're trying to implement, next generation services, for their residents. Some places, there is not enough good broadband. So, there are underserved areas of the country. And, we are addressing those. And the third is K-12 schools. Because of COVID, a lot of schools went into a distance learning mode. And they realized that a lot of the students didn't have good broadband access in the homes. So they had good broadband in schools, but no broadband in the home. So those are the kinds of schools who are coming and talking to us saying, okay, how can we extend the good broadband which we have in the schools into the community so that underserved and unserved students can have the same access in their homes as they do in the schools.
This is brilliant. I mean, I see it in manufacturing. Some manufacturers are like the size of a small city in terms of the manufacturing plants. I mean, look at some of the Amazon facilities; they're huge, and Wi-Fi just doesn't cut the mustard, right? You have to have something similar to this, and I love the idea of an entire school district making this technology available to the students. Where are you seeing most of the traction? These are very common sense verticals. Definitely, the smart cities is one as well. But where are you starting to see more traction? Is it more on the government side or commercial? Both? Where's it going?
It's actually both. So you mentioned these, some of the private enterprises can be as large as cities. We proposed a network to a large chemical manufacturer in the Gulf Coast in Texas. Their whole campus is 4.5 square miles, and a chemical manufacturing with all kinds of, distillation
Who
columns
could
and
it be?
all kinds of metal all
I mean,
around.
I live in a city that's 7 square miles. That's the size of a city. That just
It
one
is.
manufacturer. I mean, it's huge.
And then they had need for indoor as well as outdoor coverage. Why Wi-Fi doesn't work very well outdoors. They're large distribution centers. They had a rail yard which was 3 miles long and 20 rail car tracks wide. They needed
Right.
coverage there. Then they have distribution centers. Uh, Generally, Wi-Fi is the technology which has been used in these applications and distribution centers indoors. But now people are finding that Wi-Fi is not good enough. You need cellular because you have robotics inside these distribution centers. And with Wi-Fi access points, when you go from one access point to the next, you drop a connection. Whereas a cellular network is designed for mobility. So, they're finding that these cellular networks are firstly cost effective because you don't need to have as many access points. Uh, Plus, you have this nice transition without being dropped, by an access point before you connect to the next. So there is a lot of good traction in the commercial sector. And in the government sector, the federal government is pouring billions of dollars, $65 billion in the ARPA, the ARPA Act for improving broadband infrastructure across the country. So every city, every county has got millions of dollars from the federal government, and they're looking to kind of use that to improve the broadband infrastructure in their communities. And by the way, while we are focused on wireless networks, at NODABL, we offer a complete broadband solution to especially cities and counties. We also offer a middle mile fiber solution. So we will go in and take a look at the city and their needs. If they have good middle mile fiber access, we'll only offer them wireless. But if a county doesn't have good, for example, fiber access in the county, we will offer them to build for them a middle mile fiber network, and then on top of that, a wireless network.
This is where the integrator part of your business comes into play. I would think, right?
Exactly right. So as a system integrator, we integrate whatever is important, to the customer.
So let's fast forward a little bit. Let's fast forward 5 to 10 years. More cities adapt a wide range of broadband capability, make it accessible to its citizens. It becomes pretty standard to have access to the network anywhere. Right. What happens to all the major cellular carriers in that reality? What will happen to them? Do they need to evolve into giving it away for free and monetizing some other way? Because I mean, that's sort of what's happening, right? I mean, let's fast forward 10 years. That's where it's going to go, I would think. What are your thoughts?
So in many ways, the wireless carriers, the nationwide carriers, are realizing the shift which is happening, and they're not standing still. They're also actually starting to offer private networks. So I know Verizon has made a significant public commitment to that. AT&T is also starting to do that, and I know that because we lost a couple of competitive bids to to AT&T. But the carriers, it's a new reality they have to live with, and I think they're going to be adapting, and they will also offer private networks. But with a carrier, because they are so large, for them to design a network for a small enterprise, for example, as we speak today, we are deploying a network at a retailers, a landscaping company in the Dallas Fort Worth area. It's a 25-acre retail property. This network is big for them, but if they go and talk to AT&T is going to say, 25 acres, and this is too small for us to waste our
Right.
time. So
Right.
I think there's going to be room for the large players like AT&T, who might go and Verizon or T-Mobile, who might go and deploy networks for large corporations, multiple sites, etc. And then there'll be room for players like NODABL, who will address the tier 3, tier 4 enterprise markets.
Interesting. Kim?
Yeah. My question for you, I want to take it back to, I'm sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
And Zoe too. My question that I wanted to do was take it back to something you said at the very beginning of the show. And that was not only the need to adapt, but the need for businesses to create. So my question for you is, with Notable, what are you going to be creating to help make your job easier? Like, do you have your own software that you're utilizing? Because I'm hearing that there must be a lot of different factors, a lot of pieces to put together for you to best offer this service in the most efficient way possible. What's next for you? What are you going to be creating?
So that's a good question. I mean, coming from the research side of things, firstly, I like to be in a position where you can actually push the envelope, right? So our current offering is largely based on the intellectual property and the technology which is provided to us by the Nokia and the Motorola's, of the world, who are our strategic partners. But we are the one who are the closest to the customer. So we talk to the customer and we understand what the customer's needs are. And innovation really comes from understanding your customer's needs and meeting the customer's needs. So we are going to be as we mature as a company, we will be very focused on building our own secret sauce on top of what we get from a strategic partners. That helps us differentiate ourselves from other partners of these companies. There are some interesting things we are looking at. One, for example, is there's this television kind of broadcast networks. Now there is multicasting happening, with that part of that TV white space spectrum. And we're looking at ways where we can, bring in different modalities and combine the different modalities with the cellular networks we offer. For example, multicasting is great for sending, for example, movies to 1,000 people at one time. Whereas if you try to do that by a cellular connectivity, that's consuming too much bandwidth. So with multicasting, you can do that, but it doesn't have an uplink mechanism. So we can use the downlink with multicasting and combine it with a cellular uplink. And we are trying to partner with some companies and develop some innovations. But clearly, you don't survive in this industry if you're not innovating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure. So we've come down to the last minute of our show, really, and we want to ask you a little bit more about Notable. Aside from being very customer service oriented and innovation oriented, how would you describe your company culture, and what are the type of people that you look for to work with you?
Sure. So we are. So I mentioned we are located out of Waxahachie, Texas. I'm here as a CEO, sitting in my home office in Chicago. Our CTO is out of rural Pennsylvania. So we are actually a distributed companies. So in part of our culture is really one of trust. We have to be able to trust our folks. So we have a bunch of folks in our offices in Waxahachie, and then we do a lot of and that's how the telecom industry works. A lot of specialized functions are outsourced. For example, network installation. If you have to erect a 100-foot communication tower and put a radio up at 100 feet, 120 feet on the tower, we outsource all that to specialized contractors who do that. So we have created an ecosystem of partners, not just on the technology side, but also vendors and vendor services, and integrate all that. So the folks we're looking for are folks with a little bit of telecom background and can-do spirit. This is what I like to call the blue ocean opportunity. It's a new to the industry offering, private cellular networks. So there is a lot of opportunity for a lot of players to come in and contribute in various ways.
Yeah, there's so much. We can continue for like a whole nother hour talking about this. I
Sure.
see so many opportunities, even for businesses to sponsor local school system wireless capabilities for the students and the citizens. There's so many things that can be done with this for branding opportunities beyond just local manufacturer or even farming can use it. So we wish you a lot.
Smart ag is one of the areas we wanted to focus on initially, but with all this money going into federal money, you have to follow the money, right? The federal dollars going into cities and counties,
smart cities and such.
They're going to keep us busy for some time.
Well, it sounds we went from local, decentralized, long distance to now back to decentralized local. That's an interesting evolution of the telecom space.
Yeah.
But so many opportunities can come out of that. So we wish you a lot of success, and we'll have to keep touch with you guys to see how you progress along. Thanks for being with us today. We've learned a lot. Stay with us as we go off the air in just a second. Kim, what do we got coming up? This is the last show for this week. It's Thursday, isn't it? What do we got coming up next week?
Sure. Of course, on Monday, we will have our recap show where we share with our audience our opinions and thoughts about this week's shows. That's at 12 o'clock Pacific. And we do have live shows at 12 o'clock Pacific, both Tuesday and Wednesday. Thursday, there will be no live show because that is our monthly all hands. But who are we going to be talking to on Tuesday? Tuesday the 8th, we will be speaking with Brian Price of Keon. And on Wednesday the 9th, we're going to be speaking with Jared Kessler with Easy Knock. Now, I do not have the topic for Wednesday's show, but on Tuesday, it's going to be embracing the cloud. How can companies avoid inefficiencies and mistakes in the cloud to achieve better control? So as you alluded to today, Aroon, that's where it's all going, to the cloud. So it's a good show to catch for sure next week. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you.